Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Did I Get Myself Into? Easing transitions and settling into a new path. Most likely, you are changing careers, changing jobs, moving into retirement, I don't know, getting married, having a baby, who knows? But today, in this 40 to 45 minute program, you're going to learn why transitions are difficult. But then we'll discover strategies for making transitions go more smoothly so you can develop a sense of curiosity and excitement as you dive into your new adventure. I want to thank you for coming today. I do appreciate you spending this time with me. I hope you've marked this time off for you to be in a quiet space, focused, no email, no phone calls, no texts, no social media. Turn off all those ringers and notifications and just be present. Be focused in this space. Take this 45 minutes for you. And as we go through this webinar, you will hear my sad single bird peeping throughout, as you may have if you've heard the other webinars in this program. One of my birds died, and she is the one left is on her own, and she is peeping, seeking her mate. And we have not yet found a friend for her. So bear with me as we continue the webinar series in spite of the little bird sounds behind us. I'm Susan Baroncini-Moe, and I will be leading this webinar. I've led all the webinars in this series. I'm an executive coach with over 16 years experience working with primarily successful women who are executives, entrepreneurs, and other significantly high performers. I have a master's degree in social psychology, and I spend a lot of time, I've always spent a lot of time in training, in continuous development to keep my toolbox full for my clients and to keep my skill set fresh. I'm the author of the book Business in Blue Jeans: How to Have a Successful Business on Your Own Terms in Your Own Style, available from Amazon and other fine booksellers. I worked with a large variety of clients over the years on 4 continents, in a wide range of industries, and just a few fun facts about me. I held the Guinness World Records title for the world's longest uninterrupted live webcast, both video and audio, for 2.5 years. I've tried over 100 hobbies in my life. I've played violin for 38 years, so that's one I'm pretty good at. I'm on the board of directors for the Junior League of Indianapolis, and I've read a lot of books. I'm a big reader. I've read over 2,500 books on the subjects of management, philosophy, interpersonal dynamics and relationships, networking, wellness, coaching and psychology, entrepreneurship, leadership, business, personal development, and personal growth, and many other things. And I, too, have had a few transitions in my life. Now, when I was in college, I realized that my first major, violin performance, was not going to take me down the right path for me. So I transitioned majors and futures. And when I was in graduate school, I again thought, the life of a professor is not right for me. So I finished my degree by teaching web design and development, and then I was recruited to work for magazine publishing companies. So that was another transition. And when I developed carpal tunnel syndrome, I found myself faced with another transition, which took me back to social psychology and into a lot of training and ultimately coaching. Transitions abound in life. We change jobs, we change career paths, we get married, we have babies, we retire. In fact, some people say that life is simply one transition after another. Transition can hit you hard. It can be a minefield. You can feel unprepared, unsettled, generally confused. Transition comes with anxiety, insecurity, misunderstandings, and a lot of uncertainty. It also can come with excitement. I mean, it's not all bad, right? Transition can be really exciting, and you may be really curious about what's next. But because the experience can be fraught with stress, sometimes we even avoid transitions. We don't even apply for that job. We don't even consider changing careers. We don't try that new thing because it's scary. So how do we make it easier? How do we make it more tolerable and manageable? That's what we're going to talk about today. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll talk about the types of transitions that are the toughest. We'll talk about why transition is so difficult. We'll talk about how to make transitions easier and navigate the path before, during, and after so that your transition goes smoothly. And in particular, we're going to focus on the transitions that high-level leaders experience. So be on the lookout for that. From time to time today, I'm going to pause so that you can do some work in the workbook. Now, if you're live, I've emailed you the workbook. You have it in your email. If you are watching this on YouTube or on the blog, on YouTube, you'll find a link in the description of this webinar, and that link will take you to be able to download the workbook. If you're on the blog, there is a link in the blog post that takes you to the download for the workbook. So please do print that out. I recommend you print out workbooks. I've done this with every webinar in this series, and I highly, highly encourage you to print out the workbooks and handwrite your answers in the workbook. They're designed to work more effectively with your brain through the act of connecting hand to brain. And the research shows that handwriting does connect your brain a little more effectively than the act of typing. So if you handwrite your answers, you're going to benefit more from this experience than if you just type them out. So I do encourage you to print out the work. I know save a tree, I know all that. I'm sorry. Print them, front to back, do, both sides of the page, but do print out the workbooks. Okay. Let's dive in. Let's talk about the kinds of transitions and which ones we're going to focus on today. There are a lot of different types, right? Maybe it's changing jobs. That's something that happens. You grow in your career, you change companies. Maybe it's something bigger, changing actual careers. Of course, life transitions are huge. Marriage, baby, moving, any kind of life transition. We're going to focus more on job and career transitions, but there's another life transition that's also kind of connected to job, obviously. It's retirement. We'll talk a little about retirement today, but today our focus is more on job and career transitions at the executive level. We'll look more deeply at retirement on another webinar, perhaps in the spring. Each of these webinars has come with certain moments where I've realized, that would be a great webinar. So the list is long, but we're going to get to all of these. We're going to do another series in the spring. So keep your eyes open for that. So we'll focus today on job and career change. We'll talk a little about retirement, but we'll focus more on the more job and career changes at the executive level. All of the different kinds of transitions can be scary. They all can be. And they're frightening because of fear and uncertainty. We're heading into the unknown. It's something we haven't experienced before, not precisely, right? And we don't know what it's going to be like. And sometimes, let's be honest, we're transitioning for the wrong reasons. And we know that making a change for those reasons might lead us down the wrong path. And so we're going to talk about some of that today. The stakes can be very high. You're moving into a new space. If you're changing jobs, you might feel like you have a lot to prove. You might feel like you can't go back if things don't work out. And that can be very stressful, and maybe you won't like it. And I don't know. There are so many reasons why transitions can be stressful and scary. Now, we're jumping into the workbook a little earlier than usual today, but I would like you to take a moment to work in your workbook. What kinds of things are you concerned about with respect to a transition that you're facing? Why is it troubling or concerning or scary to you? Now, during these workbook times in the webinar, I'll be muting my mic for about 1 minute, which should give you enough time to get started on some of these questions. You won't get them all done in the course of this 40 to 45 minute webinar, but I do want you to get a good start on them and then come back and finish them afterward, either on your own or with a coach. Sometimes the workbooks help you to realize that having a coach is a great idea. Having an ally who can work through these things with you is great. But either way, do come back and complete this work. So I'm going to mute my mic for a minute, and then we'll come back and continue. Okay, welcome back. I hope you got a little accomplished there. All right. So how do we make transitions easier? Well, it starts pre-transition. The most important thing in pre-transition time is to know yourself. You absolutely must know who you are and what's important to you, what you value. This is the time for introspection. What do you want in life? What do you want in work? What do you want your life to look like? This question, what do you want your life to look like, is a question that I ask of all my clients, whether they're starting a business, thinking about a career or job change, thinking about retirement. If you know what you want your life to look like, then you can start to think about what you want to do to make it look like that. If you really think about it and take that quiet time to discover what you most want in life, then let's say, for example, you realize you want to be at the pinnacle of success, the highest paid CEO of everyone in your industry. Then we can craft a plan to get you there. But we need to know the destination before we can create the roadmap. Let's say you spend some time in quiet reflection. You realize you want to start a business, and you want to travel frequently and be out in the world meeting with people all the time. Then we know what the roadmap needs to look like. Or let's say you're like me and you love what you do, but it's important to you to have plenty of time at home to be with family and enjoy your life. Then we know what to include and what not to include in a business plan, right? Another thing that I factored into my business plan is that my husband, his family lives in South America, and we spend a considerable amount of time down there. We don't just travel for a couple of days, we travel for a few weeks. I needed a business where I could go down there with him and be with family. And so when I go down there, I've developed my business in such a way that I take my laptop and we go down there, and one day out of each week I work. I meet with my clients. That's it. It's very simple. I knew what to include and not include in my business plan by knowing what I wanted out of life. So we start with know thyself, know what your values are and know what matters to you. And in that, you begin to be able to craft your life. Next, you want to do your research and know what you're headed into. If you're starting a business, you want to get a very clear picture of what that business will be like. Consider all the options. If you're an extrovert, how can you start a business that allows you to engage with people frequently? If you're an introvert, how can we create a business that allows you the quiet time, that downtime that you desperately need to recharge? If you're changing jobs, you want to know the company that you're going to. You want to know them inside out. You want to know how stable the company is. You want to know about the culture and if it's a good fit. You want to be extremely clear on the responsibilities of a new role that you might take. But all of this goes beyond research. You also want to picture yourself in the new role. Picture yourself at the company or at the business you'll start. Do what we call future pacing. This is an NLP process. It's an intense envisioning of what this new role will bring. So part of future pacing involves realistic thinking. So you know how if you plan a trip to Hawaii or Paris, some beautiful place that you want to go, you think about how it's going to be beautiful and romantic and relaxing. You envision yourself in the place. And then you get to right before the trip and you start to pack. You have to get to the airport. Then you have to check your bag. You have to go through security. You have to wait for the plane. Maybe you have to get on those moving sidewalks that apparently no one can get off of. You have to be real careful. I don't know. And then you're on the plane for a while, and then you get to the place. And no, still not on your adventure yet. You have to get off the plane. You have to get your bags. You have to go through customs and immigration maybe. You have to get to the hotel, check in. You have to collapse on the bed and rest, unpack, maybe a shower. Finally, you get to go out into Hawaii on the beach or into this beautiful city of Paris and have your moment. I'm here. We have a tendency to look forward to all the beautiful, exciting moments, and we forget all the getting there parts of the transition. So just as when you plan a trip, and you don't think about the getting there part, you have to think through the getting there part for the job or the career or the business or retirement or whatever change you're going through. When people get married, for example, they don't think about the details of settling in and being married to another person. They don't think about negotiation and learning how to be married. In fact, that's a very common thing. The research shows people think about the wedding and they don't consider after the wedding. And then they end up in this marriage and they realize they haven't thought it all through yet. And this is actually one of the reasons people tend to get cold feet right before a wedding, because they start to see, wait, what happens after the wedding? Oh my gosh, I never thought of that. And similarly, when people retire, they think about all the fun things that they'll do to relax and enjoy life. You've always had vacation time, but you've always come back to something. People not kind of forget that and forget to consider that in post-retirement, we still need purpose and structure. Pre-retirement, in many instances, our work gives us purpose and structure. We get up in the morning, we drink our coffee, and we're off to work. We have structure. We do the work and we see the results of our work. We have meaning. Now, don't misunderstand. I think people need to have meaning that goes beyond work. But it's not unusual for people to get both meaning and structure from their work and to feel lost when they retire. So when people retire, they often forget to consider the structure that their work gave them. So they retire and immediately begin to feel like they're kind of listless and wandering without any idea what to do with all that time. And because they've only envisioned the part of their retirement that involves golf courses and cruises and relaxation, they never factored in the realistic part of getting used to having all that time on their hand and figuring out how to build in some structure. When people think about a new job, they envision themselves as a rock star and doing amazing, awesome things, but forget about the adjustment phase. That adjustment phase is nothing to sneeze about. So in part of your future pacing includes thinking through the getting there, because you're not going to show up and be amazing and perfect and incredible at your new job or your new career. You're not going to wake up the first morning of retirement fully relaxed and happy. You need to future pace all of it and see it all honestly, so you're less likely to be surprised by those in-between parts, those getting there parts. Another point on the importance of research is you want to make sure you don't let short-term thinking or unhappiness in your current situation, whether it's a job or career or anything else, to prevent you from doing that research. It is not at all unusual for people who are deeply unhappy in a situation to feel this sense of urgency and desperation to leave that situation. So for example, you might be so desperate to leave your job, maybe you hate your job, that you forget there might be other opportunities in the same company that you might like more than what you're doing now. Now, that's more likely when you're not the CEO. When you're the CEO, you really aren't going to move to different roles that much. But in upper management, there are often lateral moves you can make, and you might not notice that because you're so unhappy in your job. It's also likely that when you feel this kind of pressure from unhappiness, you'll do what I call research light around the opportunity you're going to, not looking at important things like culture, management style, hierarchy, colleagues, benefits, and if the responsibilities will truly fit you. There's no perfect job. There's no perfect career. There's no perfect life. The other thing is you don't want to make your decisions and transitions based on money. Even if you think, I'm leaving a current position that I hate, you want to think about how important money is to you. How money oriented are you? If it's not first on your list before you're unhappy, then you should not let it be the most important thing that's the deciding factor when you're thinking about an offer. It's common for executives to make a move for more money or opportunity for advancement, only to discover that because of the offer was so attractive, they didn't really do their due diligence in the research part. And so they end up in cultures where they're miserable. They end up in responsibilities that aren't quite right for them. So even if you're attracted to an offer, you absolutely must attend to researching the other parts of the opportunity you're going to. Otherwise, you may very well find yourself in a job or a career where you're still quite unhappy. All right, we're going to take a minute for workbook time. Write out a future pace of the transition that you're considering. Factor in all of the in-between pieces, all those little getting there pieces. What kinds of things can you do pre-transition to make the transition a little smoother or easier? And I'm going to put a minute on the clock and mute my mic, and we'll come back. Okay, I hope you got started on that. Remember that you won't complete all this work today, but it's okay to come back to it and complete it later. All right, once you've made your transition, it is very important to be patient and gentle with yourself and with others. There's a lot of pressure here, but don't expect things to come easily at first. A recent study showed that 57% of executives said it took at least 6 months to effectively assume their new role. Remember the future pacing I was just talking about? Well, there's a period of time when things won't be perfect. There will be mistakes, there will be challenges, but eventually you will get where you want to go. It just won't happen immediately. So it is very important to be patient and gentle with yourself. And you want to take your time and adapt to a new culture. Every career has its own culture. Every company has its own culture. Sometimes every department has its own culture. Give yourself permission to take the time you need to learn. Become a detective. Learn the norms and cultural values of the new space. Look for how people communicate. This obviously is more important for moving to a new company or a new department or a new job. Less important for retirement, but if you're volunteering, it matters there too. You want to look for how people communicate, how they handle things. You want to look for influencers and see how negotiations are done and how decisions get made. Look for these things even if you're moving across departments within a company. One of the things that people forget is we think if you're moving to a new department within a company, we think the norms and culture will be the same. And so we don't think we have much to learn there, but it turns out different departments have different kinds of politics and different norms, and learning those norms can be even more difficult when you're moving within a company because, we do forget that that's a thing. None of this is going to happen overnight. You may not fit in immediately, and that's okay. You just need to be patient. Give it time. Be kind with yourself, and remember the last time you were new and what that was like. It is hard to let go of old practices. It's hard to let go of ideas that you had from your last role. So take your time, find your rhythm, be patient. I literally can't say that enough times. With a transition to retirement, it's even more important to let yourself find your rhythm. It takes time to get used to the slower pace, and as I mentioned earlier, to develop your structure. In a new job, in a new company, in a new department, it's important to get to know your new colleagues and your new team and to let them get to know you. So be willing to talk to them and ask them about their experiences and what they want to achieve, and be willing to share your stories too. Come in with an open mind, be prepared to learn, because all too often executives transition into a job thinking, I have the answer. It is very important to be willing to listen and learn. It's important to know history, what's already been tried, what's worked, and what hasn't worked. Your team might have valuable insight into what could work better, so do be open to hearing their feedback. At the same time, don't be afraid to be a leader from the outset. Let your team know what your expectations are and how you work. I think it's important to learn about your predecessor, but be your own leader. You obviously don't have to do things the same way your predecessor did. Sometimes it's better if you don't. But knowing how he or she handled things will help you to understand your team better and to be patient as they adjust too. They're used to doing things the old way, so be prepared. It's going to take them some time to get used to the way you want things done. To add to that, don't change things just to change things. Part of knowing how your predecessor did things is knowing what worked and why. You don't want to come in and change things just because you can, because ultimately this just creates unease and chaos. So don't just do it because you can. Be sure to set your goals right away. Create an action plan for your first 3 months. This is an important time frame, 90 days. In those first 90 days, even though you're still settling in and getting used to things, you kind of want to make an impression. This is a statement. This time period, this is a statement about what you'll be doing and who you really are. So take a careful look at the reasons you were hired, the business case, and think about what you want to accomplish early on. At the same time, don't try to do too much. You want to remember to delegate. And if that's a challenge for you, be sure to look at that webinar on delegation that we did. It's in the blog. It's in my YouTube channel. Delegating will make you look so good and it will highlight the strength of others, which highlights your skill as a leader. So it's pretty much win-win. You can see the real challenge in the first 90 days of any role is the balance between learning about your new organization, your new role, your new department, and also taking the reins so you can build your team and secure important early wins. Another balancing act comes when you're factoring in the kinds of change you can affect in a short time. More often than not, you'll expect to be able to make a lot more change than is actually possible. We tend to forget it's not just that we're adjusting to a new role and a new culture, but they're adjusting to us as well. And if we come in and demand huge change, rejection is pretty possible. So because resistance to change can be very strong, you want to engage people in fixing the problems instead of just telling them what's wrong. Share the journey. Sharing the journey to assess what's wrong and collaborating on the solutions will help your team to feel engaged in the process, and you'll ultimately experience a lot less resistance. And as you become more collaborative and engaging your team, the more you'll discover that this is actually a great way to lead. So build relationships, step outside your comfort zones and introduce yourself to everyone, and accept as many invitations as you can because you want to build alliances. And most importantly, remain positive and curious. Even if things don't go well immediately, know that adjustment takes time. And go back to the very first thing on the list, be patient and gentle. This initial period is your honeymoon phase. Take your time. Know that you are absolutely not going to be able to operate at full potential. You're still learning that new environment. So again and again, I'm going to tell you, back to the first point, be patient, be gentle, give yourself time. Okay, let's do a little workbook work. What are the things that you missed in the past in your last transition? And what are the most important things for you to remember once you make the transition that you're now considering? I'm going to put a minute or so on the clock and we'll be right back. Okay, I hope you got some of those things jotted down. Let's take a look at skills. Often, executives think that because their current skill set got them where they are and maybe got them the new job, they think they're golden. But the reality is the skills that got you here, and I'm not just talking about technical or functional skills, but those all-important soft skills may not be enough to keep you going. You must learn to adapt your skills and strategies to a new level and a new culture, and that's where you have to grow. In most cases, executives getting hired into the C-suite know that they know they're on-the-job skills. They know creating business models and risk management strategies and all those things, but it's leadership skills that are softer, like listening, communication, building trust, collaboration, communication, empathy. Those are extremely important. It's also paramount that you're able to manage stress and help your team avoid burning out. The functional skills, those are assumed at this level, but the soft skills are even more important. And developing those skills comes through watching others and seeing how they work, as well as working one-on-one with an executive coach. We'll talk in a moment about developing those skills, but one skill you may not think about, time management. The more responsibility you have, the more important your time management skills become. You're working on so many high priority initiatives, you may have a hard time prioritizing, but effective time management and strategic prioritization is hugely important. My point here is that it's not just a coincidence that the soft skills are also the same skills that will help you adapt and adjust to your new role. If you think about it, it's pretty interesting to think about it. Your soft skills, leadership, communication, collaboration, empathy, and your character, your honesty, your integrity, those are the things that will help you to smooth a transition and get comfortable faster during a transition time. So we're going to take just a minute here. What skills do you most need to work on? And there's a space for that in your workbook. I'll put about just under a minute on the clock, and then we'll keep going. Okay, I hope that gave you enough time. Let's talk about developing soft skills. Since this is such a critical piece, I thought I would take a moment today to talk about building and developing soft skills. I work with my clients on their soft skills and developing soft skills at the peak of your career. It's always interesting, right? What's always fascinating to me is just how much of an executive's brain junk and childhood wounds play out in the C-suite, almost without them realizing it. So the first step in building and improving soft skills is awareness. It's extremely important to become aware of everything. Now, I often start with body language because I think it's instructive, and it's easier to become aware of what your body is doing. So it's a good first step on the journey. Maybe you notice your shoulders are tense, or you clench your jaw, or you check your watch a lot. I think it's important to become more aware of your physical and psychosomatic reactions. I once had a client who would begin to feel very claustrophobic whenever he thought his team meetings had gone off the rails. Once we started examining things a little closer, I realized that it was actually that his team was using their meetings as a collaborative opportunity, and he would shut those things down because they weren't on his agenda, and it made him very anxious because he thought they were wasting his time. And he was under an enormous amount of pressure to perform. And so we kind of looked at that and assessed, and assessed his physical reactions, and his shoulders would get very tense, and he would feel it in his neck and his jaw, and he would tap his foot. And there were a lot of signs to that helped us get down to the feeling of claustrophobia and assess what it was from. So I think the first place to start is with your physical and psychosomatic reactions and your body language. And once we kind of can get underneath that, we can figure out what's there. I think we send subtle messages through body language more than we're even aware. So we might tell a team member we're happy to listen, but when they begin to talk, we're already distracted and actually not listening. So I do encourage my clients to practice listening, making eye contact, treating their team members with courtesy and respect and kindness. It's important to look at your communication patterns and step into the recipient's shoes to assess. So as you communicate with another, how would you feel if you were in their shoes? And I like to do an exercise where each day I encourage you to choose something different to observe. Maybe one day it's what you do with your arms. Maybe the next day it's your feet. And those may sound a little silly, but each time you observe something different, you learn something different about yourself and about how you can improve. So it's also important to observe the other people you're talking to and see what their body language tells you about what they're saying and what their experience is. There is a space in your workbook for your observations as you embark on this experience, as you embark on this exploration. And we're not going to take time today because this is something I want you to journal. I want you to take time to observe. Now, as a coach, I find it extremely instructive to observe the dynamics in the workplace, to see how my clients and their team members, and sometimes even how their board members and how they all interact. It's really helpful to seeing what the true dynamics are, and it allows me to be more effective in working with a client who's having a little bit of a hard time honestly seeing what changes are necessary and where they might be challenged. In lieu of that, I recommend a 360-degree review process where you allow your team to share feedback with you. I encourage that to be anonymous so that your team can share honestly. As a leader, I think it's very important to be able to mentor. So it's important to practice that, to empower others through delegation with loose guidance, for example. Again, that webinar from last week on delegation will be very helpful to you as you move forward through that. These are just a few examples of things that you can do to develop your soft skills. Obviously, we could spend a lot more time going in depth with this topic, but I think this is another opportunity for another webinar in the spring. So keep your eyes open for that. Let's take another minute to jot down some ideas about how you could improve your soft skills. So what's your plan for improving your soft skills? Let's take a minute and then we'll come back. Okay. Key takeaways, things I want you to remember from today. Transition can be stressful and scary for a large variety of reasons. It is important to do the pre-transition work to make sure you're not only ready for a transition, but prepared for it. As you transition, be patient and gentle with yourself and with your team. Be prepared to set goals right away, but don't try to do too much. Balance is key here. Know that you'll need to adapt your skills to a new level and a new culture. And know that your soft skills are paramount. They're extremely important. All right, that's it for today. I hope you found this webinar helpful. Those of you who are on this webinar who'd enjoy doing a session with me, if you'd like to explore, talk about what your life is like, and see how we might apply what we talked about today, how it might apply to a transition you're considering, email me at the address on the screen, and we'll schedule a time to have a conversation. If you've missed any of the webinars that you wanted to attend, be sure to check out the blog or our YouTube channel for the recordings. This is the last webinar in this series for the fall, so be sure to keep your eyes open because I'll likely be doing another series in the spring. I want to thank you again for taking this time today. I'll see you next time.